by the time I had become a Thunderbird, I had been a combat-proven fighter pilot for 8 years, flying that beautiful F-15E Strike Eagle that I showed you earlier. I had safely led my peers in and out of combat more times than I could count. So you can imagine when I show up as an 8-year experienced fighter pilot to the Thunderbirds, I'm thinking I know everything about the teamwork and trust needed to handle change. But what I discovered very quickly is that I was the one that needed to change, that I was joining a unique and elite mission, and it was I that needed to change. And so let me tell you a couple of stories. So here I am, one of only 6 pilots in the whole Air Force, combat-proven fighter pilot. I'm a young captain, 30 years old. I remember walking onto Nellis Air Force Base that very first day. I walk in there in this beautiful giant red, white, and blue hangar, super excited, take those first steps in, and my military veterans and service members that are in here, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. But I walk in with all the courage I could muster, and I'm super excited, and I go hi to the first person I met. Hi, I'm Nicole Malachowski. I'm your new pilot. I'm ready to go fly. And I was met with a silent face and stare. And I thought, well, that was weird. Maybe he didn't hear me. By now, other people are walking forward. I said, I'm Nicole Malachowski, your new pilot. You know, people are going to go to air shows to watch me fly. I'm ready to go fly. The guy looked right at me. The senior enlisted advisor stared me straight in the eyes, straight-faced, and he said to me, quote, "You don't get to touch our jet until we say you can," end quote. Right? What an amazing first day on the job. I'm thinking this isn't going well. So I step back and he looks right at me. He says, "You don't get to touch our jet until you get to know each and every one of us. Our names, our spouses' names, our kids' names, our hometowns, our hobbies. Further, you, Miss Pilot, need to go do a little mini internship with every other career function on this team so you have a better understanding how if you don't do your job to the highest level of excellence, it impacts us. And how if we don't do our job to the highest level of excellence, it impacts you." You see, there were 125 people from 25 different career functions who came together to make that mission happen. And all it took was one of us, just one, not doing our job to the highest standards of excellence, and that entire elite mission would fall apart. The Thunderbirds taught me an extremely valuable lesson very early on, and it's this: nothing of significance is ever accomplished alone. We've talked about courage, and we've talked about teamwork and trust, and I want to talk a little bit about this idea of vulnerability. Because change is hard, right? Change is something we as human beings like to resist. Change can be scary. Now, one of the hardest things I had to learn how to do as a Thunderbird pilot was learn to stay in formation when we encountered turbulence. Now, I know what you're thinking, Nicole, you've been a fighter pilot 8 years. And in fact, I started flying at the age of 12. So by that time, I'd been a pilot 18 years. You're thinking, Nicole, you've flown in turbulence many times. Oh yes, my friends. I had flown in turbulence many times. But as my friend Kyle knows, the first time you encounter turbulence at 500 feet, 500 miles an hour, upside down, 3 feet away from 5 other jets, that is indeed an eye-opening moment, okay? So, now, my pilots out here, hopefully you can back me up on this. Turbulence is fascinating to pilots because we have weather models that can help us, kind of analyze, where and, not like, I guess, give us a feel for the atmosphere being ripe for turbulence. But these models, these simulations, they can never really predict exactly where the turbulence will happen, exactly how bad that turbulence is going to be, and exactly how long that turbulence is going to last. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Right? We all encounter turbulence. But I thought, I'm a fighter pilot, 8 years, I'm awesome, I've flown in turbulence, not a big deal. So we're 2 months into this 3-month-long training program. It's a blue sky and tailwind kind of day. We're flying my favorite diamond formation. We go out there to the jets. As we're walking to the jets, the young weather airman comes running out all excited. He gets to say something. The atmosphere is ripe for turbulence. The weather model just said the atmosphere is ripe for turbulence. I'll be honest, I was like, thanks, Skippy, no big deal. I've been in turbulence. We go out there, we're cruising along, everything is really smooth, my favorite formation, then all of a sudden, boom, we hit that turbulence. And the second we hit that turbulence, instinctually, my whole body tensed up. I started to sweat. I got a knot in my stomach, and instinctually, I grabbed that stick as hard as I could. And with each bump of the turbulence, I would fight to stay in position. With each bump of the turbulence, I would put in an input. With each bump of that turbulence, I would have to put in another input. And those inputs would have to get bigger and bigger and bigger until I got into something called a PIO, or a pilot-induced oscillation. It makes for a very ugly air show. It's impossible for your teammates to fly next to. And in fact, I was making the situation worse. Isn't that our instincts as human beings when change comes along? Do you ever try to control the uncontrollable? Do you ever try to fight each and every bump? I'm here to say that's a very inefficient use of our limited time, talent, and treasure. But it's our instinct. So there I was, fighting to stay in position, dripping sweat. I remember we finally land. And I distinctly remember as we were taxiing back, wiping the sweat from my brow and thinking, thank God I didn't hit anybody. Literally, that's what I was thinking. And we get into debrief, and the senior member on the team, he's on his second year, I'm on my first year. He's the lead instructor for the formation, a guy by the name of Steve Horton. He lives here in Florida. Steve Horton is the guy on the far right. Steve Horton's number 4. Steve Horton's the guy that flies underneath me, also known as the man that sees all my mistakes. He says to me, Nicole, what were you doing out there? You were a mess. You were all over the place. I couldn't fly next to you. I said, Steve, didn't you feel the turbulence, Steve? I was fighting to stay in position, Steve. And I will never forget this. Outside of my husband, this guy is my best friend in the whole world to this day. He stood there, and with the biggest Steve smirk on his face, he said, oh, we forgot to tell you the secret. I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, we forgot to tell you the secret for how to stay in formation when we encounter turbulence. Would you like to know the secret? I'm like, yeah, bro, information I could have used yesterday, right? He says, the secret is this, Nicole. We promise each other as a team that when any one of us in our own jet encounters turbulence, regardless of what position you're in, regardless of what formation we're doing, regardless of what maneuver we're about to do, when any one of us encounters turbulence in our own jet, we will immediately loosen our grip. The answer, Nicole, is to loosen your grip. Mind blown. The exact opposite of my instincts at that moment when I'm 3 feet away from all these other jets, right, Kyle? The exact opposite of our instincts as human beings when this change comes along. So I went home and I thought about it, and I tossed and I turned, and I was Steve Horton. He's the experienced guy. He's the instructor. He must know what he's talking about. I slept the best I could. We come out the next day, blue sky and tailwind kind of day, diamond formation. As we're going out to the jets, that young weather airman comes running out. He says, the atmosphere is ripe for turbulence. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. As we're cruising along, things are smooth. Boom, we hit that turbulence. I start to tense up, and I'm like, no, Steve Horton's like the Yoda of the team, like, loosen your grip. You know? I let go with 1, 2, 3 fingers, and I flew the jet just like this. And guess what happened? Miraculously, I stayed in alignment. We all stayed in formation. And eventually, we exited that turbulence. Because turbulence doesn't last forever. And the beauty of the whole thing, our client, the audience on the ground, never even knew. It's okay to loosen your grip. Now, I'm not giving you permission to just let go of the stick. That's not what I said, right? Choose to control the things you can control. Choose to be efficient with your limited time, talent, and treasure.